Welcome, welcome, welcome to a Get Keys with Kim production, where we discuss all things real estate, legacy and wealth building, community development, and engagement. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify, and my website, as well as to share this podcast with your network. And just as a friendly reminder, this podcast should not be considered legal advice unless otherwise stated. Get Keys with Kim does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast. I hope you enjoy. Hello, good people. It's your girl, Kim McBride, also known as Get Keys with Kim. I am back for another episode of Real Talk and Real Estate. And man, let me tell you, this is our February episode. I call it the love episode. And I'm telling you, you're going to love this. I have an awesome guest with me. His name is Kevin Parlett. But before I even introduce him and have him introduce himself, I want to tell you a little bit about him. But first, Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Kim. How are yourself?
I'm wonderful. I'm going to read his bio, but let me just tell you, I've had the awesome experience of working with Kevin twice on two different transactions. One transaction, it was my buyer who already had secured Kevin as her lender and was like, oh, I already have a lender, because that's usually the first thing we ask as realtors. You know, are you pre-approved? How much are you pre-approved for? And then we try to see if we know the lender. So naturally, we're like, okay, well, if we don't know the lender, we want to get to know them. We want to call them, see what their experience is about. And we had an amazing experience. This was probably about a year ago or so when my client says, no, Kevin is my lender. I really want to work with him. And when I tell you the process was so seamless, I was like, okay, I really like Kevin. And then we had another transaction where I represented the seller and he represented the buyer. And it was just like, when I tell you quick, I said, okay, now Kevin is my homeboy, y'all. Okay, Kevin is my homeboy. He gets the job done. And so I wanted to be able to share his wealth of information with all of you. But first, before he starts, let me tell you a little bit more about him. You ready? All right, let's go. So Kevin joined the mortgage industry 4 years ago. Since joining direct mortgage loans, he has learned the ins and outs of the industry and has made it his goal to put himself in the client's shoes, especially first-time home buyers. When he bought his home not very long ago, it was before he got into the industry, and he remembered having a lot of vivid questions, such as moments of uncertainty and frustrations that he had. It is because of his personal experience that Kevin strives to make every client's mortgage experience as exceptional as possible, and he does just that. Exceptional work. The numbers don't lie. So in the words of Jay-Z, what did Jay-Z say, y'all? Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. His numbers do not lie. So since 2019, Kevin has earned 100 plus 5-star reviews on Zillow, and in 2020 and 2021, the Scotsman's Guide top originator. His clients happily refer their family and friends because they know that working with Kevin will lead to a timely and a smooth and a communicative process. Outside of work, because we do have lives, people. I mean, he's not just here crunching numbers all day, right? So outside of work, Kevin is proud to support Hartford Family House, that's in Aberdeen, Maryland, and currently serves on the Next Gen board for Upper Chesapeake Hospital in Bel Air, Maryland. As a Bel Air native, Kevin's focus is on serving his local community and helping his clients find a house to call home in the area he has chosen to raise his family. So let's not get it confused, though. Kevin's going to tell you that he is licensed in not just Hartford County and not just Maryland. But before he does that, help me welcome Mr. Kevin Parlett. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know that, there's so much happening in the market right now, and the information that you can provide is so valuable to the listeners. So did I capture everything, Kevin? I know there's so much more to you than just, a few sentences, but you mentioned a family. I see you got a nice house in the back,
Out here in Hartford County, Bel Air. I went from townhouse to another townhouse. It's funny, the frustration and the scares of being like the first time home buyer. My boss was my loan officer. I bought the house, right? So now I'm also putting myself in the shoes. I'm also like, all right, I know I was scared, nervous, acting crazy, thinking everything was wrong.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my boss Jeff's probably like, everything's fine. Let's go.
And I think our stories are similar there, because when I became a real estate agent, because I liked the process, but I wanted to be able to, share that experience, use the knowledge that I had from going through the process of purchasing my own home. And then my real estate agent became my broker. So, it all kind of like, I get why you do it. Like, it has to be a passion, and clearly it's a passion of yours. So
For sure. But yeah, that is pretty much, me to a T, just like helping people out, spending time with family, friends, and, a job that allows me to kind of do both at the same time.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So we have a thing that we do on Real Talk and Real Estate called 21 Questions. Most times we're able to stay under the 21 questions, but you may bring some things up that may spark another question. So we're just going to follow the lead of kind of where things are going. So you ready for your 21 questions, Kevin?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to make it real simple. So what are the initial steps that a buyer needs to take in order to get pre-approved?
So the first step I always like to do is just have an initial conversation, learn about their goals financially, how little money they want to bring to the table, comfortable bringing to the table, monthly payment wise, what fits the bill. Buying a house, there's so much that goes into it, but it comes down to two things. Do you have enough money to buy it? Can you make the monthly payment work? And we got to figure out the balance in those two. So after kind of learning a little bit about, a couple of the individual, then what I'll do is I'll send them the application, list of documents that we need, and get the application filled out. That's kind of all one fell swoop and kind of gets the ball rolling. That's
actually right. I had a question that falls right perfectly into what you're talking about. So what are those documents? So I know that listeners are often, they see a lot of things online. So, and then there's different types of employment. So for those that may, be W-2 employees, those that are self-employed, those that are in the military, what type of what are the standard documents that are needed in order to start that process?
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, it's not a one size fits all answer. There's, different documents for every person, and every file will have a different set of them, but
yes,
try to keep it as general as possible. For W-2 employees, we'll need 2 years tax returns, 2 years W-2s, 30 days of pay stubs. So, 4 if you're paid weekly, 2 if you're paid biweekly.
Okay.
2 months of your most recent bank statements, checking, savings, any money you got in the bank. I think that's it for W-2. Tax returns, 2 years tax returns as well. For self-employed borrowers, 2 years tax returns, both business and personal.
Okay.
Those are very important. We basically can't do much of anything
without both.
Without tax returns for self-employed.
Okay.
Because of write-off, all of that. So for us to be able to do an income calculation, we need to be able to have stuff. And then, like you said, for VA, any of the military documents that they have and that they can provide, great. If not,
that's what's needed.
Them as well.
Gotcha. So you had mentioned as far as self-employed, so their business as well as their personal. Does it need to show something in particular on one versus the other? Like, so I know on the business side, you may take a lot of deductions, but how does that work? What exactly are lenders looking for in general? I know I just asked specifically about self-employed, but what are lenders looking for when they're asking for these documents? Yeah, when they're asking for these documents about income, are they trying to see, what a buyer is spending most of their money on? I mean, are they good stewards of their money? Is there anything, or are there red flags that lenders, like when lenders see documents, they're like, oh, I don't know, or we need more information? Like, what are lenders looking for all in all?
Yeah, good question. So basically for self-employed, I'll answer that one first.
Okay.
We're going to look to see what your gross net profit was, and then minus any of the deductions that you have. We can be creative and add back in depreciation.
Okay.
Mileage that you write off.
That's me. Lots of mileage. Yeah.
Red flags. Negative account balances can pop up every so often. If we're seeing every statement always going in the negative, that'll pop a red flag. Simple as getting a letter of explanation. If there is explanation, hey, move too much money over to the savings, cool, no worries.
Gotcha.
Underwriters, at least with us, we're in the business of trying to help people get loans, and they're not out looking for them.
All right.
But things that can pop up that are red flags as far as like income is irregular pay. We want to make sure that if you are full-time 40 hours, you're getting those 40 hours every 2 weeks. If you're a salary, that your salary is consistent with your pay stubs. And for self-employment, there are people who can make, say, $1 million, but if they write everything off and they're paying taxes like they make $30,000,
right,
that's what we're going to be.
They're going to base it off of.
Give you.
Gotcha. And I have shared with the listeners before, especially when you're self-employed and you're preparing to purchase, you really should speak to a tax preparer, but also a lender in advance, so that you're well aware going into how you should structure, your returns to reflect that information. Because we like to write things off, as a sole proprietor, with an LLC, we like to write everything off. Everything's a business expense.
I speak with a lot of people like from November, December now, that when they're going to get their taxes done, you can get it drafted before it's filed.
Okay.
Send it over to myself or the lender you're working with. Have us take a look at it, and we can say, hey, if you wrote off $5,000 less, you'd be good.
Gotcha.
Hey, this is actually, you're fine. Like, go talk to your accountant. Maybe you can tack a couple more miles on that.
I hadn't heard of that before. So you can actually get it drafted in advance and then provide that draft.
You just make sure that your accountant doesn't file them right away.
Gotcha.
They have until April 15th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go in there, chat with them, have your meeting, they'll pull everything up. They can get you a draft copy. You can take that to your lender. They can take a look at it, acting as if it was final. And if everything's good to go, you can.
And you can go ahead and process it. Okay. So as far as alternative loan options, so I've been seeing online people dropping information about bank statement loans. So you mentioned, you have to have the tax returns, and that. Are there instances, though, where you can go an alternative loan route where it's just bank statements, and how does that work?
Yeah, so bank statement loans are very popular, especially for business owners that write off a lot or don't show a lot of income.
Gotcha.
So what we'll do is take 12 to 24 months of business and or personal bank statements, take all of the deposits across those 24 months, divide it in two, and then divide that by 24 months. So if you had $100,000 of deposits, you would take $50,000 over either 12 or 24 months, whichever.
And that should show income, so to speak.
Yeah. So positives of that, if you don't have qualifiable income, but you're making a ton of money through bank statements, we can show that.
And it should
reflect get you a loan. Downsides, it's going to come with a higher interest rate. It will come with higher costs.
Gotcha.
But,
And when you say higher costs, is that upfront costs, or are you talking about higher costs down the line? So, with interest rates, that's something that kind of stays with you until you refinance.
Correct. Yeah, so a little bit of both, right?
Gotcha.
With a higher interest rate, you're going to have higher costs just across the life of the loan if you keep it.
Right.
Upfront costs, there'll be more discount points as far as just the general cost of the loan. So, if no discount point rate was 6.5% for a bank statement loan, you might be at 8% interest rate, but have to still pay a point, 2 points with it. Those numbers are off the top of my head, nothing that is real.
Definitive, right. So for those that are not aware, what when you mentioned points and discount points, what is that? And is that a benefit? Is that an asset to buyers, or is that?
It all depends on the situation. So discount points. So when you're buying or you're getting an interest rate, or you see an interest rate advertised, if you think about it almost like an a la carte menu, right? 6.5% is the rate today. We can go up to 7.5%. Lender credit to help towards closing costs. Vice versa, we can go down to 5.5%. And as you work your way down, more discount points will be associated with it, which would increase the cost. So, for example,
let me get an example.
If you want to rate it 6.5% today, you want to get 6%, that may cost you one discount point. One discount point is 1% of the loan amount. So on $200,000, that would be $2,000. So what I would help you figure out is, does the monthly payment savings from 6.5% interest rate to 6% outweigh $2,000? And that's
Gotcha.
I would believe that it would, but there would be a certain point where going from 6.5 to 6 costs 1 discount point.
Okay.
From 6 to 5.8 costs 2. And it's like, all right, well, that's where it doesn't make sense.
Gotcha.
That's what I would like to refer to as like the breaking point, where like, all right, we figured out where the stopping.
Right, where it has to make sense. The that break even point. So would that be beneficial for those that maybe have more that are more flexible with cash and with a lower interest rate?
Yeah, definitely. So
okay.
If you have a goal of monthly payment that you're trying to hit or comfortable with, but say you have 8% that you could be putting down towards the purchase. Well, if the minimum down payment needed is 3 or 5%,
okay,
rather than putting that additional 3% just to the principal, you can use some of that money to help buy down the interest rate.
So that your monthly payment is less.
So gotcha. Basing off 200,000, right? If 3% is $6,000, that would lower your payment by about $30 just by putting $6,000 to the payment. But if you can buy your interest rate down 0.5%, that could end up taking you down $65, $80. So it can definitely far outweigh it depending on your goals. But if you think you're going to only be in the house for a year, 2 years,
then it probably wouldn't make sense. Gotcha. Would you suggest buying down the interest rate in this particular market? I know it's going to be case by case, so it's not going to work for everybody regardless of what market that we're in. But, this episode is marry the house, date the rate, right? So someone falls in love with a house, they presume that they're going to be there longer than a year, maybe a couple of years, let's say 5. Would it make sense?
So right now, no.
Okay.
I don't think buying down the rate makes a whole lot of sense in the current market, just because we are seeing that rates are going to come down at some point in the next 12, 24, 36 months.
Gotcha.
It's an interesting question, though, because the cost of lending has just increased over the last 6, 8 months. It'll be hard pressed to find a lot of loans without some sort of discount point attached to it. And
gotcha.
The reason why is if we flash back to like 2019, anybody who bought a house in 2019 was in this loan. The bank was going to be collecting money for 5 or 7 years, the average length of someone who owns a home.
Right. Staying in a property.
Excuse me. Well, when 2020 and the pandemic hit, interest rates dropped. Every single person in the world, it seemed, refinanced, right? It was awesome.
Because we saw amazing rates.
Yeah, I loved it. But all of those banks who did loans in 2019 made no money on this one.
Gotcha.
So what we're seeing right now, while rates were up, and especially when they were in like the 7s, discount points were being associated because banks knew that those loans were going to be the first ones refinanced out of.
Gotcha.
So they were trying to collect their money up front, or at least hedge some of that.
Gotcha.
The lending industry, after spending 2 years in like a refi boom market, we just know how to talk about refinancings, explain the benefits of it, and we can do it very quick now.
Yes.
And I think the banks know that, right? And they know when rates drop, we have a sticky note on our computer of people that
call these. Yeah.
I'm calling, right? So I'm not alone at that. So they know. That's why, while I wouldn't be buying down the interest rate very far, I also wouldn't be shocked if I saw discount points associated with the loan.
Gotcha. And so I know that interest rates are buzzwords, especially amongst buyers. Like you said, during the pandemic, I had seen an interest rate as low as like 1.7, 1.9. Like they were just amazingly low. And so a lot of people were refinancing and a lot of people were buying and a lot of people were selling. And so now we're in a market where, what would you say? I know the rates change every day and can change multiple times a day. So where are we rate-wise, would you say?
So today, if somebody was buying a house, we'd be quoting in high fives, low sixes.
Which is great because I saw 7s and 8s not too long ago, which was like, clutch your pearls.
Yeah.
You know?
When we were at 7s and 8s, that was when discount points were on it, right? So it's like, hey, here's 7.5%. Also, you need to pay $2,000
an extra.
to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, not fun. But that's when more like creative things started coming out, like 2-1 buydowns and all these different avenues to help curb that. So like DML, for example, we anybody who purchases a home right now, if they refinance in 2 years after purchase, we'll waive all the lender costs for the refinance. And we
within 2 years or at their 2-year mark?
Within 2 years.
Okay.
So at any point within 2 years, we do that for a couple of reasons. Right? One, we know when rates are up, it stinks. It's not fun. We also want to let the borrowers over when they're we're with them. We understand. We want to make sure to help you get into when you get in that house long term. Forever loan, at that point. But two, also benefit us, right? It allows us to kind of incentivize people to want to, hey, let me make sure I call Kevin again and work with them. Again, using just $200,000, that could save $3,500 just in costs.
Gotcha.
Just on $200,000. So, if you're talking $400,000 or $500,000 home, that could be $5,000-$6,000 that you're saving right there. So
gotcha.
Those are just like techniques that we're doing. We're not alone in that either. And the industry as a whole is trying to rally around it.
So now I have 2 questions. So you mentioned the 2-1 buy down. So I do want to get into that. But you also mentioned that there were lender fees associated not only with, you mentioned refinancing, but I know there are also lender fees when you're purchasing. So can you speak to what those lender fees are so that the listeners have an idea of when we say lender, I mean, is that just the cost of doing business? Like what is included in those fees? And then can we also jump into that 2-1 buy down? Because that's another buzz phrase that's going on now.
It's very buzz phrase.
Yeah.
So lender costs, in this scenario, lender costs, I'll be referring to any origination, any processing fee, any underwriting fee. So any of the loan costs. That wouldn't include any discount points or anything like that. Those are loan costs. I would differentiate them from lender costs. So
so lender versus loan costs.
Yeah, people may hear closing costs and lender costs or loan costs, and oftentimes those are mixed up and
used interchangeably, right?
So whether you work with myself or lender B or lender C, if you're choosing the title company, the title work is going to be the cost same with either three.
Right.
If you have a homeowner's insurance policy that you acquire, it's going to be the same with any 3 lenders. So those closing costs are the same. It's those 3 are the ones you're going to want to really differentiate if you're looking around the cost of the lender. Transfer taxes, all of that is based on the purchase price of the home, right? So that's going to be the same no matter which lender you choose. But all of those are closing costs, all in all, right? Because it goes towards that bottom dollar of what you have to pay. And it leads back to one of the first things I said, right? Having the money to buy the house and the monthly payment. So whether it's lender costs or not, you want to know what that final number is, right? If I'm saying, hey, Kim, your loan costs are $9,000, but your lender costs are $3,000, and your transfer taxes are $2,000. All right, thanks for the breakdown. What's the total number?
Gotcha. All right, so let me I want to make sure I'm understanding because I'm learning some things too. So when your real estate agent, when your title company, when they say the amount of closing costs you need to bring to the table, they're talking about your loan costs or they're talking about everything?
Everything. So at the end, we just call it total cash to close. If you're down, all your loan costs, which will include your prepaid, taxes,
Mm-hmm.
Any reserves you're putting in to set up for your escrow account, transfer taxes, title work, credit report fee. That's another lender cost that's in there, like $400 or $500. Anything like that. So there can be on, some of the more detailed ones, 150 line items.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the more basic ones, 50 or 60.
Gotcha. So there is a difference between lender costs and loan costs. So one with the loan, that's actually what it costs to get that particular product. Because everybody gets a different product. You can get conventional, you can get FHA, you can get, USD. I mean, and there's other programs. And you also do home ready, and you also do, work with, down payment assistance with buyers. So I do want to get into other program and then down payment assistance options that there are. So let me also make sure I'm understanding before we move on from that point. So how do lenders get paid? Is that a lender cost or is that a loan cost?
It would be like a lender cost.
It would be a lender cost.
Yeah. So like the lender cost, I would more put down as just like a loan cost all in all.
Okay.
I differentiate a lender cost in this scenario because of what we're willing to waive in that.
Gotcha.
Right? Our origination and our underwriting fee. That's how our company pays the underwriters, and that's how we get paid. So to answer your question about how we get paid, it's generally through either an origination fee, underwriting fee, or processing fee, depending on what part of the transaction you're in.
And so for buyers who start a loan with you, so they purchase a home, if they refinance within 2 years, those are the costs that you're waiving.
Correct.
The origination, the processing, the underwriting fee, like those fees are being waived if they refinance with your company.
Correct.
Within 2 years. This is happening right now. This is in the year of our Lord 2023, people. Okay? Within 2 years. No later than 2025. You heard it here first. I'm just saying. Jump on it if it works for you. Okay. So you also mentioned, before we get into 2-1 Buydown, you also mentioned something about discount points. We spoke about that. But then you also said something about a lender credit, and that could also affect the interest rate. How does that work? Is everyone eligible for this lender credit? I mean, what is it exactly?
So it's the same exact thing as buying discount points, just the opposite, right? If you're someone that, hey, I can handle a little bit more of a monthly payment, but saving up right now is a little tough, so I need a little bit more help cash to close wise.
Gotcha.
Cool. We can get you a higher interest rate and help give you a lender credit. In the current market, with rates being as high as they are, it's a little bit tougher to give lender credits as it was during COVID or prior to COVID, but it's still an option, right? We haven't seen a whole lot of it because to go from 6% with 1 point all the way to 8% to get a half a point lender credit doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But those are where the options are, and we're hoping that we get back to a normal market sooner rather than later, where we can kind of start using those tools that we have a little bit more. But just basically, if you're good with the monthly payment, I can actually take on another $50, $60. But how do I get, make up that last $2,000 I need to buy the house? A lender credit.
And that might be. Gotcha. So it's case by case. You really need to just kind of speak with your lender to see if it makes sense.
And based on the market too.
Yes, it's based on the market.
All that changes daily as the rates change. The credits will change. They'll get smaller. They'll get bigger. It's all based on market.
Yeah, and I tell my listeners and even my clients all the time, like, nothing is free, right? You hear lender credit, but it's going to come with a cost. You just have to figure out whether that's a cost that you're willing to pay, whether it makes sense to do it. So always reach out to your lender. I always refer my clients back to their lender. I try not to. I always say that's not my wheelhouse. I know a lot about a little bit, right, about this one area of lending, but there's so much to it. And I tried to read the guidelines one time for one thing, which was about COVID and, breaks in employment. It was pages and pages and pages. I'm like, they're like, if this is the situation, then it's this. But if it's this, then it's, I said, this is why I can't be a lender, because I'm stressed.
By the
Right?
time we
Just
finish,
tell me if you're pre-approved. Yeah, tell me if you're pre-approved so that we can go look at houses, which is my favorite thing to do.
that
So,
was that was wild times during COVID. Those things were changing daily, if not
yes.
like weekly, if not daily.
Yeah. And then here's the thing. You're racing against a clock, right? So when you're putting an offer in on a home and that offer is accepted, there's a date that you're expected to close. And God forbid that seller needs those funds to then purchase another house. Like it's almost sometimes a domino effect. It's like everything had to be on. I'm glad we're out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's still going to be some folks that are buying that were on the tail end, like they lost employment still during like the heavy times of the pandemic and the whole COVID epidemic. But for the
Well,
most part, we're our 2 years that,
yeah.
we're past our 2 years pretty much.
What, 3 years since?
Yes.
Started.
Can you imagine? I just think back, this time 3 years ago, I had just left my full-time job. We broke up and I was like, I'm going to go into real estate full time. And I was extremely nervous about what that would look like for me. 30 days later, a shelter in place. I'm like, oh my God, did I go into the right, did I do the right thing? And here we are.
I was going on my bachelor party in February 3 years ago. And my buddy was like, "You guys wearing your mask?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? You don't need to wear a mask. You don't got to worry about that."
Right.
All right, well,
We're in a. I mean, I had a cruise plan. You couldn't tell me. I was like, yes. And I'm like, oh, well, that's over there. It's not in the U.S. yet. Like, I'm going to go ahead and who knew?
Oh, man.
Who knew? Like, if we had like a crystal ball to like, who knew that that's where we would be? It doesn't feel like 3 years.
No.
It doesn't feel like 3 years whatsoever. So I know that buyers have seen that rate. They saw the rates in 2020, 2021, 2022, and they're like, I want those types of rates. We've talked about the lender credits. We've talked about the discount points, but now there's this 2-1 buy down. So what exactly does that mean? Who is it for? How is it beneficial? How is it not beneficial for some?
So 2-1 buy down is like a great tool, like to open up the discussion, right? Because it's not going to be for everyone.
Okay.
So essentially, the premise is, again, just for round numbers. Let's say the rate today is 6%.
Okay.
2-1 buy down for your first year, your rate would be 4%. Second year, 5%. On the third year, it would be the note rate of 6%.
Okay.
So
wait, let me just make sure I'm following you. My buyer comes to you. They've gotten pre-approved. The interest rate when they go under contract or when they purchase is 6%. Let's say it's March 15th, March 17th, it's St. Patrick's Day. Okay. So St. Patrick's Day, you're telling me from March 17th, 2023 to March 17th, 2024, their interest rate, which should have been 6%, is now 4%.
Yes.
Y'all. Okay. All right, Kevin, go ahead. Spill the tea.
So what's awesome, right, is you got this lower rate for year one,
Mm-hmm.
got a lower rate for year two, then come year three,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit, it's back to the 6%. And hopefully at that point you've been able to refinance and do a lower fixed rate, right? We hope we're in lower rates in 3 years.
Yes.
The downside, I guess you could say, to it is the cost associated with it, right?
Okay.
So it's not a direct discount point per se.
Okay.
I think on average is about 2.5% to 3%. What it is all the difference between the first year, the difference in interest between 4%,
Mm-hmm.
6%, and the difference between 5% and 6%.
Oh, and 6%. Okay.
Year two. All of that is paid up front. So what you're going to end up having is either the buyer or the sellers covering the cost of that interest up front.
Okay.
So what we would try to do is get that covered into a seller credit.
Gotcha.
So with seller credits, they can cover that cost. 3%,
Mm-hmm.
get 3% seller credit on a conventional deal. Boom, done. That's covered by the seller. So
Gotcha.
the reason why I said, buzzword that's coming around a lot is great great product to use, and it was very popular when rates were in that 7 to that like
Higher.
8%.
Yeah.
The problem was is like a lot of the areas with inventory, there was no seller credit to really be getting on the market. So if you're paying for an adjustable rate, upwards towards $12,000 up front, you're just paying the interest up front. So now that we're kind of getting back to a little bit normal of a market where seller credit's kind of making a little bit of a comeback here.
Right. Yes, it is. I'm seeing it.
Definitely an option if rates start to tick back up. But if you're paying it as a buyer, I would be recommending look at what using that same 2.5% discount point would get you in the fixed rate. Because if that can get you down into the low 5s, that may be more cost effective
Right.
than
Starting at a 4.
refinancing it, and whatnot. So it's a great tool to use. Most people that we've spoken with, when they've looked at it, if they weren't able to get the seller to cover it, found it wasn't for them. And that's not to talk anybody out of it not being good idea. Because if you can get the seller help and you have the cash, use that seller help to buy your interest rate down.
Yeah.
Because we're probably not going to be at 4% in the next 2, so you can kind of double dip when that refinance time comes as well.
They can contact you. Are you seeing the full circle moment, people? This is within the 2 years, okay? With your loan costs being waived, refinancing within 2 years, if that works for you. So what I hear you saying is that ideally the seller would give the credit, would pay that interest up front for the buyer. But if the seller doesn't, the buyer could do it, but it really needs to make sense. You would kind of talk with them about whether that's more of a discount point situation where they're buying down the interest rate a little bit, or doing the 2-1 buy down where they're paying the interest up front for the next 2 years, but their interest rate is low right now.
Definitely, right? Because if say your plan's not to be in that house for 5 years, paying $12,000-$13,000 up front for a lower payment for 2 months or 2 years, excuse me.
Right.
You might want to keep that money in the bank
and have it liquid. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a wrap, folks. Looking forward to you guys tuning in another 2 weeks for a new episode of Real Talk and Real Estate with your girl, Kim McBride. Have a great day.